Hey everybody, my name is SPAZ and I'm a CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about one of the strangest, weirdest, most wonderful bands you're ever going to hear. They have been with us for almost 50 years, and I'm sure that a lot of you have never heard them. You know why? Because they're weird, they're strange, they're quirky, they're eccentric, they're eclectic, but damn, they are doubly awesome. That's right, I'm talking about the Residents. However, I'm only going to talk about maybe their first 15 years of existence because that's what I have in front of me. So let's get started because there's a lot to talk about. First off, everything that you've heard or read about the band may or may not be true. All the band members have been anonymous for all these years. We kind of know who they are. You can get on the internet and make your guesses, but you're never 100% sure, and that's the great thing about the Residents. They hide behind this wall of anonymity so they can be judged by their art, and art it truly is. And they've done all this without having a top 40 or top 100 or top 500 single. But it seems that so many people know who the Residents are, but they've never heard them. I'm not going to legally be able to play you any Residents music here, but I can assure you after this video, maybe you should go check out one of the albums that I talk about to see if it interests you. But all I can tell you is just prepare yourself, because nothing I say will ever be able to properly describe the band. You have to hear them, you have to experience them to believe them. I always like to start off these episodes by telling you how I got into a band. Basically, starting in the mid-70s, I'd been seeing their records in bins, could not figure out what they sounded like looking at the front and back of the album cover. Usually you can do that. With the Residents, I couldn't. But then one day in 1979, I'm at Licorice Pizza and I see this import compilation called Nibbles, and it was priced the same as an American album. So I thought, I'm going to check that out. That's going to be a cheaper way for me to hear the best of the Residents. And I took it home, put the needle on, and I can tell you after about 20 minutes, I took the record off, put it back in the sleeve, and sold that record to a friend of mine because it was way too weird for me. I was not prepared for it at 16 years old. But at 17 years old, I thought I'd give them another shot when their album, the commercial album, came out, and it blew my mind. Then I loved them, and I went back and I loved everything. But anyway, let's start going through their catalog here. I'm going to make this as quick as possible. Everything I say is my opinion. Nothing is based on truth and nothing is based on lies. This is basically fake news. Let's start off with this album. This is the Delta Nudes. This is recordings like before they were known as the Residents. Early recordings, hissy, rough, scratchy, but very interesting and unique. I wouldn't recommend this as a gateway album, but if you've got all the other stuff and you want some more very early Residents, definitely get this. In 1971, the guys put together an album and they sent the tapes to Warner Brothers Records. Warner Brothers Records refused to release it, but they did send back a nice thanks but no thanks message. But since the band didn't tell them what their name was, Warner Brothers addressed it to Residents, and that's how the band got their name. Now, there's this compilation called A Nickel If Your Dick's This Big, and that includes the entire Warner Brothers album, plus lots of bonus tracks, and then their Baby Sex album with a bunch of bonus tracks. Both of these came out in 1971. The thing about these recordings is they're not so much songs as they are collages. The bands had great big ideas, big, wonderful, bombastic ideas, but they were not skilled musicians. They just maybe knew a few chords, so they banged a lot on wires and drums, and they were able to make something resembling a unique sound. It is unique, it is strange, it is weird, it is not as great as the other stuff I'm going to talk about, but it's very interesting to hear the band at these very early stages. And that's part of the preserved set, 2 CD set right there. 1972, they released a single called Santa Dog, earned them a lot of press. Follow that 2 years later by Meet the Residents, a parody, obviously, of the Beatles album cover. This preserved edition includes the mono version of the album, plus a remix stereo version of the album that came out a few years later, plus lots and lots of bonus tracks, most of them previously unreleased. This is less like a collage of found sounds and more like a collage of early songwriting excursions. There are some great songs on here. Still, their ideas were bigger than their combined talents. It was almost like they wanted to make Avengers Endgame, this big, huge movie, but all they had was a flip phone to film it put on. But it's still wonderful. It's still fresh. 1976 gave us the Third Reich and Roll, which originally consisted of 2 sidelong tracks. One was called Swastikas on Parade. The other was called Hitler Was a Vegetarian. Each sidelong medley consisted of their interpretations of classic 60s rock tunes and some 70s things as well. They had progressed a lot since Meet the Residents. Of course, this version contains loads of extra material. They followed that in 1977 with Fingerprints, which was a very unique album. This was more song-oriented. You can tell that their musical skills were catching up with their ideas, and this is a great collection. Includes loads of bonus tracks. Great collection there. In 1978, they put out Duckstab, which was an EP, and it was even better than Fingerprints. Everything was coming together so well for them. It's still very strange, very odd. The punk, post-punk, avant-garde audiences were totally catching on to them. And after Duckstab, what they did is they had another EP called Buster and Glenn. Well, instead of releasing that separately, they just took the Duckstab songs, the Buster and Glenn songs, and created this album. And the CD, of course, has loads of bonus tracks. And during this time, they had been working on this new project called Eskimo that was far from finished. But the label, Ralph Records, their own label, needed to release product. So what they did is they released an album called Not Available. The story behind this is they recorded this album in 1974, and they came up with this theory of obscurity where they wanted to put the album in the vaults and not let it get released until they had forgotten they recorded it. I call BS on that whole thing because this album is just absolutely fantastic. It is wonderfully executed. If this was really recorded in 1974, they wouldn't have been able to play their instruments this well. Things wouldn't have sounded this good altogether. This is probably my favorite album of the period. And this, of course, features the whole album plus bonus material. I know it's confusing. Everything about The Residents is confusing. Everything I'm saying is a lie, and everything I'm saying is the truth. But this is that. Now, the interesting thing is, a couple years ago, they released it, and this version here features a few tracks that add up to maybe like 10 minutes extra of music, but they did not feature it on the preserved edition. So I would say definitely you need to get both if you are a Residents fan. Finally, 1979 comes that Eskimo album, and this is the first time that they're wearing the eyes, and this is a fabulous album. Interesting thing is, it's kind of like a weird avant-garde, post-punk, new age album. It's all music and sound effects that tell a story, a day in the life of an Eskimo. Yeah, I know, nuts, crazy, but it's compelling, and it's dramatic, and it's wonderful. And of course, this version contains more bonus tracks, including Discamo. What they did on Discamo is they created an extended dance mix featuring some of the best melodic bits from Eskimo. You know, you think to yourself like, oh, disco. It's like, it's the Residents disco. Trust me, it's not what you think, but it's everything that you need. And there is that, Eskimo. Then 1980 comes the commercial album, the album that really sold me on them. This actually consists of 41-minute songs. You can either use the 1-minute songs as advertising jingles, or you can program each song 3 times to make the perfect length pop song. Unique idea. It's still strange as heck and odd and wonderful. Interesting thing is the album features vocal appearances from Andy Partridge from XTC, Lena Lovitch, Brian Eno and David Byrne are on one song, Fred Frith is on another song, Snake Fingers on it. It's just absolutely, it's the strangest, weirdest thing, and it's wonderful. And this has loads of bonus material. Then in 1981, they released Mark of the Mole, which is a story of 2 cultures coming together. The moles have been driven from their home, and the Chubs take them in initially, welcoming them as equals, but they actually turn them into slaves. This was the actual Mark of the Mole album that came out in 1981. It was followed by Tunes of 2 Cities, which is probably my second favorite Residents album, maybe even tied with Not Available. Now, it's chiefly instrumental, but it is just absolutely fascinating. It shows you the different styles of music that the Chubs make and the Moles make, and the Chubs, Moles, it goes all the way down. And that has more bonus tracks. And part 3 never actually came out, but there was part 4, The Big Bubble, and this was actually not members of the band. The Big Bubble are actually a band supposedly consisting of the children of illegal unions between Chubs and Moles, and it's a very unique album. But those 3 albums, and 3 more can be found in the Mole box. And you get some live releases and some rarities from the same time period. And that all goes in one box here. But I'm kind of going to cut the video off now, only because if I talk about all the Residents releases, it's going to take 3 hours. And I wanted to focus on this time period because this seems to be the classic period, at least for me. Classic period actually for some people ended at 1980, but I think it goes up to 1982. But I've got a couple other things I want to show you. One of the bands on the Residents label, Ralph Records, was Ronaldo and the Loaf. And the Residents actually recorded an album with them. And this is called Tidal and Limbo. Came out in 1983, but it was actually recorded in like 1981 and 83. And this disc has bonus material. Also, during this time, the Residents released the Whatever Happened to Vonless Fats soundtrack. This was a film that they were working on from like 1972 to 1976, and it just never came out. I think 35 minutes out of 15 hours of footage was actually released, but the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. This also includes the Census Taker 1985 soundtrack. Here's another variation on that same release. This actually has more songs from the Census Taker, so you might want to track that down. Some rarities came out on this Residue compilation. It's actually really, really fantastic. Some of my favorite Residents material is on this. And then also they can be found on first 3 Snakefinger albums. And then finally, if you want to really get into the Residents but don't know where to start, 80 Aching Orphans is a great collection. This covers the band's entire career from the early days, but it's all mixed around. You're just going to have to swim through a bunch of these great little musical surprises. So remember, if you're looking for something different, something strange, something odd, something that's both frightening and comforting, definitely check out the Residents. I appreciate you sitting around and listening to me babble about this great, wonderful band. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until the next time we meet, my name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD Junkie.